The rain came down in sheets that August night, turning the gravel parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly into a constellation of puddles that reflected the orange glow of the overhead lights. It was 11:47 when Jennifer Lynn Haywood pushed through the glass doors, her white sneakers splashing through the warm Georgia rain, her arms cradling a single paper bag pressed against her chest to keep it dry. Inside, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, and a small bottle of children's Tylenol. Her daughter had a fever. That's the only reason Jennifer was out this late on a Thursday night in rural Walton County, 20 miles east of Atlanta. The parking lot was nearly empty, just her silver Honda Civic parked under the light and a dark pickup truck idling near the edge of the lot, exhaust rising into the humid air. Jennifer didn't notice it. She was thinking about her daughter's temperature, about whether she should call the pediatrician in the morning, about the fact that her husband was working the night shift at the poultry plant and wouldn't be home until dawn. She clicked the unlock button on her keys. The car's lights flashed once. She reached for the door handle. And then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. A witness later said they heard a sound, maybe a shout, maybe just the wind. By the time the store manager locked up 15 minutes past midnight, the silver Honda was still there. Driver's door hanging open, groceries scattered across the wet pavement, milk spreading in a white river toward the storm drain. Jennifer Lynn Haywood, 23 years old, mother of one, vanished into the Georgia night as if she'd never existed at all. For 29 years, her name became a whisper, a ghost story, a cold case file gathering dust. Until one phone call changed everything. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. Jennifer Lynn Haywood wasn't supposed to be a statistic. She was supposed to be someone's mother for a lifetime, not just 2 short years. Born in Monroe, Georgia, in 1971, Jennifer grew up in a small brick house on Magnolia Street, where the air always smelled like pine and cut grass. Her father worked at the tire factory. Her mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families in the subdivisions that were starting to spring up around Atlanta's expanding orbit. Jennifer was the middle child, sandwiched between 2 brothers, and from an early age she possessed that particular kind of steadiness that middle children often develop. She was the peacemaker, the one who remembered everyone's birthday, the one who stayed late after family dinners to help wash dishes while everyone else drifted to the living room. She graduated from Walton High School in 1989 with decent grades and big dreams of becoming a nurse. But life had other plans. She met Danny Haywood at a 4th of July barbecue in 1990, married him 8 months later, and by 1992 she was cradling a baby girl they named Autumn. Jennifer never made it to nursing school. Instead, she worked the register at the Walton County Public Library, checking out romance novels and helping elderly patrons use the new computer catalog system. She was 23 years old that August night in 1994 when she drove to the grocery store. She had her whole life ahead of her. She had a daughter who needed her. She had a husband who loved her. She had a mother who called her every Sunday morning without fail. And then, in the time it takes to walk from a store to a car, she had nothing but absence. The day had started like any other Thursday. Jennifer woke at 6:30, made coffee in the Mr. Coffee machine on the kitchen counter, and got Autumn dressed for daycare. The summer heat was already pressing against the windows by 7 a.m. Found the kind of thick, suffocating Georgia heat that makes your clothes stick to your skin before you even step outside. Danny had left for work before dawn. He was pulling double shifts that month, trying to save money for a down payment on a house. The double-wide trailer they rented on Chapman Road was fine for now, but Jennifer wanted a real house with a yard where Autumn could play. She wanted to plant tomatoes and maybe get a dog. Small dreams, simple dreams, the kind that people build their lives around. She dropped Autumn at her mother's house at 7:45. Her mother, Carol Matthews, lived just 2 miles away in the house where Jennifer had grown up. Carol worked from home doing medical billing, so she watched Autumn 3 days a week. Jennifer remembered kissing her daughter's forehead, feeling it warm beneath her lips, noticing that Autumn seemed a little fussy. But toddlers were always fussy about something. It wasn't until her mother called the library at 3 in the afternoon that the worry started to creep in. Autumn's temperature was climbing, 101, then 102. Jennifer's supervisor let her leave early. She picked up Autumn at 4, took her to the pediatrician's walk-in clinic by 5, and by 6:30 they were back at the trailer with a diagnosis of a summer cold and instructions to give Tylenol and plenty of fluids. But by 11 that night, Jennifer realized they were out of both children's Tylenol and milk. Danny wouldn't be home for hours. Autumn was crying, her little face flushed with fever. So Jennifer did what any mother would do. She buckled her daughter into the car seat, drove the 15 minutes to the 24-hour Piggly Wiggly on Highway 78, and left Autumn sleeping in the car with the windows cracked while she ran inside. It took 7 minutes. 7 minutes to grab the items, wait in line behind an elderly man buying cigarettes and pay the cashier. When she came back outside, Autumn was still sleeping peacefully in the back seat, her little chest rising and falling. Jennifer put the groceries in the front seat, started the engine, then realized she'd forgotten the children's Tylenol. She grabbed the adult bottle by mistake. She turned off the car, grabbed the bag, and went back inside. Another 4 minutes. The cashier, a teenage boy named Marcus, who would later give a statement to police, remembered her clearly. She was polite, apologetic, a little frazzled. She exchanged the Tylenol and headed back out into the rain. That was 11:47. By 11:49, Jennifer Lynn Haywood had ceased to be a person and had become a mystery. Marcus, the cashier, didn't see what happened. He was counting his drawer, getting ready for the midnight shift change. But there was another witness. Patricia Granger, 56 years old, had been sitting in her Buick in the parking lot, waiting for her husband to finish his shift as the night manager. She was parked 3 spaces away from Jennifer's Honda. She told police she'd been listening to the radio, not really paying attention, when she heard something that made her look up. She described it as a scuffling sound, like feet dragging on gravel. When she glanced over, she saw Jennifer standing at her car door, and then, Patricia said, there was a figure. A man, she thought, though she couldn't be certain. Tall, dark clothing, moving fast. It happened so quickly that Patricia's mind didn't process it as an attack, not at first. She thought maybe it was Jennifer's husband, maybe they were having an argument. She looked away. She turned the radio dial, and when she looked back, maybe 30 seconds later, Jennifer was gone. The Honda's door was open, the groceries were on the ground, and Patricia heard a child crying. That's when she knew something was terribly wrong. She honked her horn, long and loud, and her husband came running from the store. They found Autumn in the back seat, screaming for her mother, her little face red and streaked with tears. The milk had spilled, the bottle rolling under the car. The bread was soaking up rainwater, and Jennifer was nowhere. Patricia's husband, Robert Granger, called 911 at 11:56. The Walton County Sheriff's Department arrived within 8 minutes. By 12:15, there were 5 patrol cars, their blue lights painting the parking lot in ghostly strobes. By 12:30, they'd called in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. By 1 in the morning, the parking lot was a crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape that snapped and twisted in the wind. And by dawn, Jennifer Lynn Haywood's face was on every news channel in Georgia. The investigation started with the obvious questions. Where was the husband? Danny Haywood was working his shift at the poultry plant when Jennifer disappeared, clocking in at 6 p.m. and not clocking out until 6 a.m. the following morning. 43 people saw him there. His supervisor confirmed he never left the floor. He was eliminated as a suspect within 24 hours, but not before the police searched their trailer, questioned him for 6 hours straight, and looked into his finances, his past relationships, his criminal record, which was non-existent except for a speeding ticket in 1991. Danny was devastated. The detective who interviewed him, Raymond Hodge, a 20-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, later said he'd never seen a man more broken. Danny kept asking the same questions over and over. Where is she? Is she hurt? Is someone helping her? Detective Hodge didn't have answers. Nobody did. The crime scene yielded frustratingly little evidence. There were tire tracks near where Jennifer's car was parked, but it had been raining, and the impressions were degraded, impossible to match to a specific vehicle. Patricia Granger's description of the figure she'd seen was vague at best. Tall, maybe 6 feet. Dark clothing, possibly jeans and a jacket. No clear view of the face, no distinguishing features. She thought she'd seen a truck, dark-colored, maybe blue or black, parked at the edge of the lot, but she couldn't be sure. Her husband thought he remembered seeing it too, but their accounts didn't quite match. Was it a Ford or a Chevy? Was it idling or parked? Had it been there when Jennifer first arrived, or did it pull in after? Memory is unreliable under the best circumstances, and this was far from the best circumstances. The police canvassed the area. They interviewed every employee who'd worked at the Piggly Wiggly that night, every customer who'd made a purchase between 10 p.m. and midnight, every person who lived within a mile radius of the store. They found nothing. No one had seen Jennifer after she left the store the second time. No one had seen anyone suspicious. The dark truck became a ghost, a phantom that might not have even existed. Meanwhile, Jennifer's family was unraveling. Carol Matthews, Jennifer's mother, moved into the trailer with Danny and Autumn, trying to hold things together. She took over caring for Autumn full-time. She cooked meals that no one ate. She answered the phone every time it rang, hoping for news, dreading news. Danny stopped going to work. He spent his days driving the back roads of Walton County, searching drainage ditches and abandoned buildings, calling Jennifer's name into empty fields. He made flyers with Jennifer's photo, her smiling face from their wedding day, and stapled them to every telephone pole and bulletin board in 3 counties. The community rallied. Volunteers organized search parties. Bloodhounds tracked Jennifer's scent from the parking lot to the edge of Highway 78, where it vanished. Divers searched the Yellow River. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children added Jennifer to their database. America's Most Wanted featured her case in October of 1994. Tips poured in. The sheriff's department followed up on every single one. A woman in Savannah who looked like Jennifer but wasn't. A man in Florida who claimed he'd seen her at a gas station but recanted when questioned. A psychic who said Jennifer was buried near water, which narrowed it down to approximately half of Georgia. Detective Hodge worked the case for 2 years straight, barely sleeping, missing his own daughter's high school graduation because he was chasing a lead in Alabama that went nowhere. He interviewed registered sex offenders in the area. He looked into unsolved murders and missing persons cases across the Southeast, searching for patterns, connections, anything that might point to a serial offender. He found nothing that stuck. By 1996, the case had gone cold. Not officially, never officially, but the active investigation had stalled. There were no new leads, no new evidence, no body. Jennifer's case file sat on Detective Hodges' desk, growing thicker with dead ends and false hopes, until he retired in 2003 and passed it to a younger detective who promised to keep looking but had 50 other cases demanding attention. Years passed, and the world moved on the way it always does, indifferent to individual grief. Autumn grew up without her mother, raised by her father and grandmother, carrying the weight of a tragedy she was too young to remember. Danny never remarried. He kept Jennifer's clothes in the closet for a decade before Carol finally convinced him to donate them. He kept her wedding ring in a box by his bed. Every August 13th, the anniversary of her disappearance, he drove to the Piggly Wiggly parking lot and stood where her car had been parked, as if standing vigil might somehow bring her back. Carol Matthews aged rapidly after losing her daughter. Her hair went white within 2 years. She developed high blood pressure and anxiety so severe she couldn't leave the house without medication. She kept a candle burning in the front window of her house, the same window Jennifer used to look out of as a child, a beacon in case Jennifer ever found her way home. The community too was marked by Jennifer's absence. The case became one of those defining tragedies that a small town carries in its collective memory. People still talked about it at the diner, at church, at high school football games. Jennifer Hayward, that poor girl who vanished from the Piggly Wiggly. Some people claimed to know what had happened. Bar talk, gossip, conspiracy theories. She ran away with another man. She was killed by a drifter. She's buried somewhere in the Oconee National Forest. But theories without evidence are just stories, and stories don't bring people home. Detective Hodge never stopped thinking about Jennifer. Even in retirement, he kept a copy of her case file in his home office. He'd take it out sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep and raid through the witness statements and evidence logs, searching for something he'd missed, some detail that might crack the case open. He found nothing. And then in the summer of 2023, 29 years after Jennifer disappeared, something extraordinary happened. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a man named Curtis Wayne Holloway, 67 years old, dying of stage 4 lung cancer in a hospital in Macon, Georgia. Holloway had lived an unremarkable life. He'd worked construction, never married, lived alone in a series of rental houses across middle Georgia. He had a few minor arrests in his youth, bar fights, disorderly conduct, but nothing that would have flagged him as dangerous. Certainly nothing that would have connected him to Jennifer Haywood's disappearance. But as death approached, something in Holloway shifted. Maybe it was fear of divine judgment. Maybe it was the unbearable weight of secrets carried too long. Maybe it was the morphine loosening his tongue. Whatever the reason, in July of 2023, Holloway called for a chaplain and asked to speak to the police. He wanted, he said, to confess. The detective who responded was Sarah Chen, a 15-year veteran of the GBI's cold case unit. She'd been assigned Jennifer's case in 2020 as part of a statewide initiative to review unsolved disappearances using new DNA technology and investigative techniques. She'd reviewed the file multiple times, interviewed Danny and Carol again, even visited the Piggly Wiggly parking lot, though the store had closed in 2015 and the building now housed a furniture outlet. She'd submitted evidence for retesting, but there wasn't much to test. No DNA, no fingerprints, no physical evidence that could be meaningfully analyzed. The case had felt like a dead end. So when she got the call about Holloway's confession, she was skeptical. Deathbed confessions are notoriously unreliable. People confess to crimes they didn't commit, seeking attention or absolution. But she went to the hospital anyway. Holloway was gaunt, oxygen tubes in his nose, his voice barely above a whisper, but his mind was clear. And what he told Detective Chen over the course of 3 interviews, each one recorded and witnessed by hospital staff and attorneys, was chilling in its detail and specificity. Curtis Holloway confessed to abducting and killing Jennifer Lynn Haywood on August 13, 1994. He said he'd been parked at the Piggly Wiggly that night, sitting in his truck, a 1988 Dodge Ram, dark blue, waiting. He claimed he hadn't been waiting for anyone in particular, just looking for an opportunity, a woman alone. When Jennifer came out of the store the second time, groceries in hand, he saw his chance. He approached her from behind as she reached for her car door. He put a hand over her mouth, grabbed her around the waist and dragged her to his truck. She fought, he admitted. She was strong and she fought hard, but he was bigger and stronger, and he got her into the passenger seat before anyone could react. He drove east on Highway 78, then turned onto a series of back roads that wound through farmland and pine forest. Jennifer was crying, begging him to let her go, telling him about her daughter. Holloway said that part bothered him, even at the time. He'd thought about turning around, letting her out, but he didn't. He drove to a remote area near Hard Labor Creek State Park, about 40 minutes from the Piggly Wiggly. There in the woods off an old logging road, he killed her. He wouldn't say exactly how, only that it was quick and that she'd been terrified. He buried her body in a shallow grave, covered it with leaves and branches, and drove home. He said he burned his clothes in a barrel behind his house, scrubbed his truck clean, and then went to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. He'd followed the news coverage, watched the search parties on television, seen Jennifer's face on the flyers that papered the county, and he'd said nothing for 29 years. Detective Chen asked him why. Why Jennifer? Why that night? Why confess now? Holloway didn't have satisfying answers. He said Jennifer was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He said he'd been drinking that night, feeling angry about his life, looking for some way to feel powerful. And he was confessing now because he was dying and didn't want to face God with that sin on his soul. It was narcissistic even in confession, focused on his own redemption rather than the devastation he'd caused. But Detective Chen didn't care about his motivations. She cared about verification. Over the next 3 weeks, Detective Chen worked to corroborate Holloway's confession. The first step was locating his 1988 Dodge Ram. Holloway claimed he'd sold it in 1996, but DMV records showed the truck had been registered to him until 1999, when it was sold to a junkyard in Athens. The junkyard's records were spotty, but eventually Chen tracked the truck's VIN number and found that it had been crushed for scrap in 2002. No physical evidence there, but Holloway had provided specific details about where he'd buried Jennifer's body. He described the logging road, the particular grove of pine trees, a creek that ran nearby. He drew a crude map. On August 2, 2023, Detective Chen led a team of forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, and ground-penetrating radar technicians to Hard Labor Creek State Park. The logging road Holloway described had been overgrown for years, barely passable even with four-wheel drive vehicles, but the dogs hit on a location within an hour. The team spent 2 days excavating the site. 4 feet down, in red Georgia clay, they found human remains. The body was badly decomposed, reduced mostly to bones but still partially articulated. Scraps of fabric clung to the remains, a white t-shirt, denim shorts. Jennifer had been wearing a white t-shirt and denim shorts the night she disappeared. Her mother had described the outfit in detail during the initial investigation. The forensic anthropologist confirmed the remains were consistent with a female in her early 20s. Dental records confirmed the identity: Jennifer Lynn Haywood. After 29 years, she'd been found. The news broke on August 4, 2023, and it sent shockwaves through Georgia. The story was picked up by every major news outlet. CNN ran a segment. The Today Show interviewed Detective Chen. And in Monroe, Georgia, Carol Matthews collapsed when the police came to her door. Not from grief. She'd been grieving for nearly 3 decades. This was something else. Relief, maybe. Finality. The terrible, awful knowledge that her daughter wasn't out there somewhere, suffering, waiting to be rescued. She was gone. She'd been gone all along. Curtis Wayne Holloway was arrested on August 5, 2023, charged with felony murder, kidnapping, and concealment of a death. His arrest took place in his hospital room, Detective Chen reading him his rights while he lay in bed, too weak to stand. He waived his right to an attorney and continued to give statements, seeming almost eager to provide details. He was indicted by a Walton County grand jury on August 23rd. Legal experts said it was an open and shut case. Holloway's confession, corroborated by the discovery of Jennifer's remains exactly where he said they'd be, was devastating evidence. But Curtis Holloway never stood trial. On September 9, 2023, less than 5 weeks after his confession, he died. The cancer took him quickly in the end. His death meant there would be no trial, no opportunity for Jennifer's family to see him held accountable in a courtroom, no chance for a jury to deliver a verdict. There was only the confession, the evidence, and the certainty of his guilt. For Danny Haywood, now 54 years old, the news brought a complicated cascade of emotions. Relief that he finally knew what had happened. Rage at the man who'd stolen his wife and then lived freely for 29 years. Grief, renewed and raw, as if Jennifer had died all over again. He'd spent 3 decades wondering if she might still be alive somewhere, if she might walk through the door one day. Now he knew she never would. Carol Matthews, 79 years old and frail, finally blew out the candle in her front window. She buried her daughter in a ceremony attended by hundreds of people. Far more than Jennifer had known in life, but drawn together by the power of her story. Jennifer Lynn Haywood was laid to rest in Monroe Cemetery under a magnolia tree, her gravestone reading, "Beloved daughter, wife and mother, lost but never forgotten, 1971-1994. Autumn Haywood, now 31 years old, gave a statement to the press. She said she had no memory of her mother, only photographs and stories. But she was grateful to finally have closure, to finally be able to properly mourn. She visited her mother's grave with her own children, Jennifer's grandchildren, who would grow up knowing their grandmother's name and story. The arrest and subsequent death of Curtis Holloway sent ripples far beyond Jennifer's family. The case became a flashpoint in Georgia for discussions about cold cases, victims' rights, and the importance of never giving up on investigations no matter how much time has passed. Detective Raymond Hodge, the original investigator, now 78 years old and living in a retirement community in Florida, heard about the resolution on the news. He wept. He'd carried Jennifer's case with him for decades, and while he was grateful for the closure, he was haunted by the question of what he might have missed, what he might have done differently. The truth was, he'd done everything he could with the tools available in 1994. DNA databases were primitive, surveillance cameras were rare, digital forensics didn't exist. He'd worked the case as thoroughly as anyone could have. Sometimes the monster just gets away, at least for a while. Detective Sarah Chen became something of a reluctant hero in law enforcement circles. She'd worked dozens of cold cases, but Jennifer's was the one that broke through. She gave interviews emphasizing the importance of persistence, of new technology, of always keeping the files open. But she also emphasized something else. Luck. If Curtis Holloway hadn't gotten sick, if he hadn't decided to confess, Jennifer might never have been found. The case could have remained unsolved forever. That's the terrible randomness of justice. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes 3 decades too late. The Piggly Wiggly parking lot, though no longer a grocery store, became an unofficial memorial. People left flowers there, teddy bears, handwritten notes. The furniture store that occupied the building eventually installed a small plaque near the entrance. In memory of Jennifer Lynn Haywood, 1971-1994. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. It said, "We remember." It said you were here. It said your life had meaning beyond the way it ended. The resolution of Jennifer Haywood's case reminds us that evil sometimes wears an unremarkable face, that monsters can walk among us undetected for decades, working ordinary jobs, living ordinary lives, carrying extraordinary secrets. Curtis Holloway was not a boogeyman or a criminal mastermind. He was a man who made a terrible choice one night in 1994 and then lived with that choice, his conscience silent enough that he could function, work, even sleep at night. Only the approach of death made him speak. We're left to wonder how many other Curtis Holloways are out there, carrying secrets to their graves, leaving families without answers, without closure, without peace. Jennifer's story is also a reminder of the thousands of missing women whose cases remain unsolved. Women who vanished from parking lots and convenience stores and walking trails and never came home. Women whose families still light candles in windows, still put up flyers, still hold out hope against hope. Jennifer was one of the lucky ones, if you can call it luck to be found dead after 29 years. At least her family knows, at least she came home. But there's a deeper lesson here about vulnerability and how quickly life can change. Jennifer wasn't doing anything risky that August night. She was being a mother, buying medicine for her sick child. She was in a lighted parking lot at a public store. She was gone in seconds. We tell ourselves stories about how to stay safe. Don't walk alone at night. Don't talk to strangers. Trust your instincts. As if following the rules guarantees protection. But Jennifer followed the rules, and it didn't matter. Sometimes the danger finds you anyway. That's not to say we should live in fear, but rather that we should live with awareness that we're all more fragile than we'd like to believe, that the people we love can be taken from us in a heartbeat, and that every moment we have together is borrowed time. Hold your loved ones close, tell them you love them, leave the porch light on, and never ever stop searching for those who've been taken. Because even after 29 years, even when all hope seems lost, sometimes the truth finally breaks through the darkness.